Hey, what is going on, everybody? I'm back with my latest video. As I told you guys, I'm going to be speaking about the quarterback position entering my fantasy football drafts are coming up here over these next few weeks. I know I told you guys beforehand I was going to do my rankings, but I decided to tier out these quarterbacks because I don't really I go off of necessary rankings for myself. I actually kind of have an idea of how I view groups of quarterbacks and where I'm willing to take them. So I decided to tier out the top 24 quarterbacks that I got my eyes on. And I did the 24 quarterbacks just because, people do play in obviously bigger leagues, 12, 14 team leagues. And then we got the double quarterback leagues as well. And as far as my personal strategy, before I dive into my tiers, my ideal strategy is I want to just a plug and play guy. I want to be able to set my quarterback. I don't want to have to worry about him. I don't want to waste a bench quarterback spot when I can stack up my bench with running backs and wide receivers. That's how I've always had my thought in fantasy football with the quarterback position. But sometimes, these quarterbacks, they go a lot higher than I'm willing to take. I usually want to at least get to the fifth round before I take my quarterback. And then it's always depending on where they are at, where I want to get them. And then if I do strike out on quarterbacks that I view that are like plug and play type of quarterbacks, then that's when I go to my fallback strategy where I try to go draft a high upside young quarterback in the later rounds, but I also like to combine that young quarterback with a veteran quarterback that can at least get me by through parts of the season while the young quarterback is getting acclimated to the NFL if they're in their rookie season, or maybe they are in that year 2, year 3, and then they get that gradual push to their ceiling for that season as a fantasy player. So yeah, let me just go ahead and dive into my first set of tiers. These are basically the plug and play guys, the quarterbacks. I called it the quarterbacks I trust the draft high tier, and it's pretty simple. I mean, everybody knows these names. It's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Jalen Hurts. I think they're all in great offenses. I think they're quarterbacks that you can just put them in your lineup, and you know that you don't have to take them out of the lineup unless an unfortunate injury, of course. But more the best case scenario is you only take them out of your starting lineup when it's the bye week. And then I did go back and I looked at these quarterbacks and see what their average fantasy points per game off of Pro Football Reference since 2020. So these are since 2020. Patrick Mahomes has the second highest point per game average. Josh Allen actually has the highest point per game average. Lamar Jackson sitting at the fourth most points per game. Joe Burrow is sitting at the seventh most points per game. Justin Herbert is sitting at the sixth most points per game. And then Jalen Hurts, he's at 14th points per game, but remember, 2020 was his basically rookie season, and he didn't play a lot, and then he got more acclimated in last year 2 years ago in 2021. Then he obviously took that big leap where he was in the MVP conversation last year. So I think once we get removed that 2020 season, his higher point per game average is definitely going to be up there inside the top 5, top 10. Then moving into the next tier quarterbacks that I got my eyes on, I call this the quarterbacks I take the leap with tier, which is basically quarterbacks that, I don't know if they're necessarily entering the year plug and play guys, but they are guys that I view that if they are able to take advantage of the offensive situation that they are in and they are able to hit their ceiling for the 2023 season, that they're guys that I'm only going to be able to take out of my lineup when it's the bye week. These are guys I think that can happen for them. These are guys that I don't want, if I draft these 4 players, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, or Tua Tagovailoa, I don't plan on drafting another quarterback. I'm going to draft out my bench with running backs and wide receivers, and then these are quarterbacks I'm willing to take the leap with, take the chance with in those first 4 weeks of the season, and they're going to be my quarterback. Now, obviously, if they are not meeting the expectation for being that QB1 week in and week out, that's when you can pivot and take a look at the waivers. Maybe you can take a look at the trade market. But yeah, I think they're all good in good situation. Deshaun Watson has a loaded offense that he's going to be playing in, and then when you look at the points per game since 2020, he actually has the 5th highest average in that time frame among quarterbacks. And then Trevor Lawrence, with the addition of Calvin Ridley, I really think he's going to be pushing for an MVP award by the end of the season. And then obviously everybody's really high on Justin Fields. He gives you that super high floor, but I think that addition of DJ Moore is going to take his passing game to the next level, which will make him more of a complete quarterback, especially in terms of fantasy, but he gives you a high floor. And then we saw what Tua could do last year, right? Tua was like on his way of being a plug and play guy with the performances he was putting up at the beginning of the season, but then unfortunately the injury. So if you take him, I'm willing to take a leap. I'm putting faith that he'll be healthy for all 17 games. And if he does, in that Mike McDaniel offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you got a guy that's going to be able to push for a fantasy QB5 by the end of the year. Moving into the next tier of quarterbacks, these are basically veteran quarterbacks that I believe can at least get me through the first half of the season tier. And what do I mean by that? These are guys that I think it's worst case scenario, maybe they are your plug and play quarterback throughout the year because the upside quarterback that you maybe combine them with doesn't reach their potential. For example, the guy on the list, Kirk Cousins, a couple of years ago, what I did in that draft is I left a lot of drafts with Kirk Cousins and Trey Lance. And that was Trey Lance's rookie year, so that's when Jimmy started all those games. So Trey never got on the field, but I had Kirk Cousins who was playing really good and was putting up points for me throughout the fantasy season. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to stick with Kirk. And I really didn't have to get rid of Trey Lance, but what's funny is Trey Lance, people might forget, but Trey Lance ended up playing the fantasy football championship week that year, and I replaced Kirk even though Kirk got me there, and Trey Lance actually helped me win championship in that game. So that's these quarterbacks that I'm thinking, right? Like Aaron Rodgers, and when points per game since 2020, fantasy points per game, he's got the 10th most. Dak Prescott has the 8th most. Kirk Cousins has the 12th most. We saw what Geno Smith did, and I've talked about it in my late round quarterback video I did a couple weeks ago. And I think with Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think Geno's going to be a quality guy. And then Daniel Jones not only has the high rushing floor, similar to Justin Fields, right? But they made some additions where they got Darren Waller, they got Paris Campbell, they got a lot of death by paper cuts wide receivers, but I think Darren Waller is going to be the Travis Kelce in that offense. So I think Daniel Jones is a fantasy quarterback that's just the way I view these group of 5 veterans is these are solid fantasy quarterbacks. I don't think they necessarily offer you a high ceiling. I feel like they are a very safe option for you that can at least get you through the first half of the season, where if you do want to late in the draft take an upside quarterback to maybe get you that ceiling type of play when we get to the fantasy football playoffs. But then I also believe these are guys that, what if Aaron Rodgers in that Jets offense blows up like it could be, right? Then all of a sudden you just got a plug and play guy, and then you can maybe look to trade the young guy you combine him with, or maybe you just put faith in these guys, you draft them as plug and play guys, but then you just got to keep an eye on how they're performing in that first 4 to 6 weeks while you keep an eye on the waivers and seeing if there's a quality quarterback with an upside that maybe somebody dropped at some point at the beginning of the season. Now, speaking of these upside quarterbacks I keep on talking about, these are my upside late round quarterback tier guys I got my eyes on. Obviously, the rookie quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and C.J. Stroud. Jordan Love is this is basically his rookie season, right? And I was a big Jordan Love fan entering that draft class, so I'm putting my pre-draft belief in him, and then him being in that offense underneath their coach, that they're able to not necessarily put up Aaron Rodgers level numbers, but I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be that bad like some people may think it could be. And then I threw Kyler Murray on there here. Now, what's interesting about Kyler is Kyler actually has the 3rd most fantasy points per game for quarterbacks since 2020. Now, Kyler obviously is coming off that torn ACL. He's probably going to miss the beginning of the year. I know there's been chatter that he wants to push the play early, but with this basically being I don't want to call it a redshirt year, but it's an evaluation year for that Cardinals new front office and coaching staff, that they don't necessarily need to rush their quarterback. It's not like they I know every team says they want to go win a Super Bowl, but they know deep down inside this roster's not good enough to compete for a Super Bowl, so don't rush your quarterback back. But at the end of the day, they are paying him a lot of money, right? And they got to put butts in seats. So at some point, Kyler's going to play this year. So it's going to be interesting to see where his injury report comes out over these next few weeks and how that affects his ADP, because there's a good chance where people just don't draft him because he's hurt, and that's a guy I'll definitely have my eyes on the waivers if that ever happens. If you, or people drop him because he's not, or he's like on, because if he's on IR, he has to miss like the first 3 to 6 weeks. I forget the length on that. But yeah, that's somebody I definitely have my eyes on. But I love the three rookie quarterbacks. I think Bryce Young's in a great offense underneath Frank Reich, and I think he has just enough pieces that he's going to be able to be maybe a spark plug in that Panthers offense. And then Anthony Richardson gives you that high floor. It sounds like CJ Stroud's been lighting it up in training camp, and I think he has like a good group of skill position players around him where he can be a quality guy. And then I already spoke about Jordan Love. So these are guys that, if I draft one of those other quarterbacks I just talked about, and that quarterbacks that get me in the first half, I wouldn't mind combining these guys on my bench while I wait for one of these young guys eventually hit their stride. Now, if you do miss out on one of those veterans I mentioned in the first half, my last tier is placeholder quarterbacks for these upside quarterbacks I just talked about. Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, and Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr. Jared Goff he has got like 7 games in a row that he finished last year with over 200 yards passing. And we saw what that Lions offense can be. And then they added Jahmyr Gibbs, who will be a receiving threat as a running back. So it'll be interesting to see how this Lions offense looks in this opening game against the Chiefs. And I think Jared Goff would be a decent guy that's going to be a placeholder until one of the upside guys. Russell Wilson was in my video. I talked about quarterbacks I wouldn't mind targeting late to go with an upside quarterback, and he does have the 11th most points per game among quarterbacks since 2020. Now, obviously, we got to see how he looks in the Sean Payton offense, but I'm putting belief that Sean Payton is going to at least get him closer to the level of Russell Wilson that we saw for over a decade of football. Matthew Stafford, obviously, you got to watch the injury, but anytime you get a great quarterback in a Sean McVay offense, I think he's at least a decent placeholder to begin the year. And then Derek Carr, they do got some nice weapons down there in New Orleans with assuming Michael Thomas does stay healthy into the season, Chris Olave. They got like a group of tight ends too. So I can see Derek Carr having not necessarily a high floor. A high ceiling as a fantasy quarterback. I think it could be a nice high floor for your fantasy team until one of those upside guys that offer you a high ceiling hit the ground running, and then you can replace Carr, get rid of him, and put one of those younger quarterbacks into your lineup. So yeah, those are my tiers entering my fantasy football drafts. My next tier video I'm gonna be doing on the running backs. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe, follow me. Share the video, whatever platform you're on. As you can see, guys, I am on Twitter. I post these videos on my Twitter. I post these videos on my TikTok, and I do post these videos on my YouTube as well. So hit me up with a follow, like, subscribe. If you have any questions, hit the comment section. I'll get back to you. You guys, peace out. I'll talk to you later.